All right. Hopefully that'll work. If not, I'll do it again fifth period. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some connecting themes. One of the things that we learn as we study history, as we study the social sciences, and that can be a lot of different things. That can be archaeology, philosophy could even be considered a social science, psychology. History is actually a science. You can actually apply the scientific method to it. I wouldn't advise it, but you can. One of the things we learn as we go through this, as we talk about history, as we talk about how people have interacted with each other, how people have interacted with their environment, with society, we're going to find some themes that connect all this stuff. And there are 10 of them that we'll talk about, as you can cited notes thing. And the reason we do this is because we're going to see them throughout our study of Georgia history. We're going to see these themes and how they connect not only events that happen and people that happen in one era, for example, but we're going to see how they're connected across years, in some cases, hundreds of years. So, connecting themes, again, there are 10 of them. Some of them you might have seen before. Technically, all of them you should have seen before. Hopefully you have, but if you haven't, this will be brand new for you. So there are 10 of them. Conflict and change, and that's probably the most, I don't want to say important, but that's the one that we're going to see more of. Conflict and change. Movement and migration. What does that have to deal with, do you think? Okay. Trail of Tears would be an example of movement or migration. It was forced migration, though, right? People just didn't pack up and go, hey, let's move to Oklahoma. The United States Army said, hey, pack up and move to Oklahoma. And so that's what they did. Didn't matter that it happened to be the middle of winter, and they died on the way. But yeah, a movement of people is what we normally think of, or a migration of people. But what we'll learn, if not today, then tomorrow, it can also be ideas. So, distribution of power, you've probably heard of that one before. Location, how many of you know what longitude and latitude are? Then you've talked about location. Individuals, groups, and institutions. Production, distribution, and consumption. That one is primarily economics, which is actually a social science. You will take that in your senior year. The rule of law, you've probably heard of it. You may not have heard it described or referred to as the rule of law. Technological innovation. Again, that one's probably right up there with conflict and change as far as what we will talk about as we talk about Georgia history. Belief and ideals, and then governance. And we're going to talk about each one of those things. They're not in the same order. For some reason, I didn't put them in the same order, but we're going to do it anyway. You ready? Ready to go? Oh, I kept promising you something, and there you go. All right. So, 10 connecting themes. If you haven't written them all down, you're going to have the opportunity to do that as we work our way through these. So let's go ahead and get started. The first is called conflict and change. Those two are, you can't have one without the other. Let's just put it that way. Because where there is conflict, or when there is conflict, either between societies or within societies, you're going to have change. Always. Wherever there's conflict, there's change. Does conflict have to be bad? Let me back up just a second. How many of you, when you hear the word conflict, your stomach tightens up a little bit and you start thinking bad things? You think conflict is bad. How many of y'all are like that? I don't like conflict. I don't know anybody that does like conflict. But yet it is necessary. And it doesn't have to be negative. We usually think of it as negative. But conflict can actually be good conflict. Let me give you some examples. war. Is war ever positive? No. So war is a negative conflict, right? I mean, it is. We look at it and we go, war bad. Okay, unless there's something wrong with you, you don't look at war and go, war good, war bad. So, is there going to be change when there's a war? Yeah. Think about 1776. What happened then? Revolutionary War. Somebody just tried to say the Civil War, and I was going to stab them with a sharp. Okay. Revolutionary War. What happened because of that conflict? Basically, the United States rebelled from Great Britain, waved at King George, threw up the middle finger, and said, "We're going to be our own country." Well, he did. That's basically what happened. The result of that, or the change that came about because of that, was what? We're American citizens. We're not British citizens. Okay? What about the Civil War? When did that happen? Close. What? Close. Okay. 1861 to 1865. Okay. What was it fought over? Okay, that's who fought in it, but why did they fight? Slavery. Slavery. That was the cause of the Civil War. And I know people that will argue with me till they're blue in the face, and that's okay. They can be wrong, and they are. Because all I have to do is pull out the 11 secession ordinances from the states that became the Confederate States. Every last one of them says, we are doing this because we want to keep our slaves. We think slavery is a good thing. So this war is fought between the United States, and you hear people refer to them as the Union, right? And I've read a book over the summer, and I decided, you know what? It wasn't the Union, it was the United States Army and the Confederate States Army that fought. It wasn't the Union Army, it was the Army of the United States of America. So they fought, and they fought over slavery. Okay? If you take the perspective of a Confederate person, was the war a good war? In other words, was the cause just to preserve slavery? Was that a good thing? Okay, maybe from a southern perspective. What about from a northern perspective? Was the war a just war, a war that's intended to end slavery? Was that a good thing? The cause was just. World War II. What was World War II fought over? Well, what? A craving for power. Who wanted that power? The Nazis, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, Italy, and originally the Soviet Union were on the axis, or what we would call the bad guys. Was their cause just? No. Take over the world. The United States enters the war in 1941. Why? Well, Pearl Harbor, but there were a lot of other reasons too. What if America had never entered World War II? We might be speaking German today. And if you're a Jew, you probably wouldn't be in here. Or if you were a gypsy, or if you were a Jehovah's Witness, or if you were Catholic, you might not be in here. And so those are examples of conflict. War is an example of conflict. There's usually a side that this is justifiable, our cause is good. Then there's a side that might think their cause is good, but the rest of the world looks at it and goes, no, it's not right. And there's always change. What was the change that came about in the Civil War? 13th Amendment is ratified, ending slavery in the United States. What about World War II? Germany is actually divided into two. Okay, no longer different countries, but for a time it was. But yeah, German army was destroyed. They're no longer a military power. They're more concerned with internal things rather than trying to gain land. Imperial Japan, the same thing happens. Italy, the same thing happens. Tyranny, the oppression of people, is overcome. Civil rights movement's an example of conflict and change. Sometimes it was violent conflict, sometimes it was peaceful conflict. But the result is the same. There was change. And all you got to do is look around this room for evidence of that change. All you got to do is go to any school, pretty much, and you see the evidence of that change. Schools were desegregated. Children went to school regardless of their race or their ethnic background. We're going to Atlanta, and because of the civil rights movement, I don't have to worry about getting accommodations for white students and black students. We're going to be in the same hotel. That's a direct result of that conflict that happened. There was a change. Black Lives Matter. We can say the same thing. How many of you have brothers and sisters? Do y'all ever have conflict with one another? Yeah, one's saying yes, one's saying no, and therein is conflict. Okay? Well, if you have a brother or sister, then I know you have had conflict, right? Some of you decided you weren't going to take it anymore because your big brother, your big sister had been picking on you, and you took the wooden spoon and you beat them with that wooden spoon. They don't mess with you anymore. There's conflict, and now there's change. And some of you were on the other end of that. You were the big brother, the big sister, and you got your head handed to you one day because your little brother got that wooden spoon, was standing over you, beating you with that wooden spoon. No, but do you pick on him anymore? Maybe not as much, because what? There's always this idea in the back, he might beat me with a wooden spoon or something. If you've had conflict with your parents, clean up your room. Okay. And 3 hours later, you come back and it's even worse. Is that if it were in my household, there would have been change. Okay? There would have been. They might not have owned anything anymore because I might have just gotten it, thrown it in the truck, and taken it away. But because there was conflict, there was going to be change. And that's something we see repeatedly, over and over and over. All right. Number 2 is technological innovation. And everybody knows what technology is, right? And innovation means there's something new. So it's new technology. Well, technological innovations, new technology always has consequences. It comes with consequences. And they can be intended and unintended. How many of you know what cotton gin is? Who? Eli something. Eli Whitney. Was he one of us? Was he from the South? He was not. He was from New England, actually, and had come to the South to teach, to tutor a family, the children in a family. They owned a cotton plantation. Whitney observes that in order to process the cotton, you have to have a lot of people. They're going to take a cotton boll, which is, if you ride by a cotton field, that's that big white fluffy thing. That's a cotton boll. When you pick cotton, you pick not only the boll, but you pick this hard, crusty exterior that falls away at the bottom, and there's seeds in it. And in order to process the cotton, you got to remove that outer shell, and you got to remove the seeds. Well, how do you do that? Before the cotton gin, this is how you did it, with your hands. And so Eli Whitney's seeing this, and he observes, you know what? If I can come up with a machine, then those slaves don't have to spend their time seeds out of cotton. And there'll be no more need for slavery. That's his intention. Well, what happens? The cotton gin is invented. It begins to be produced. And people realize something. They realize there's a lot of money to be made in cotton. And so they begin to plant more and more cotton. What, particularly in the early 1800s, how do you get cotton out of the field? Again, hands. And so instead of driving the need for slaves downward, which, by the way, is the trend it was taking anyway, and most historians think if the cotton gin were not invented, slavery would have disappeared in the American South. Because the only reason that slaves were used in the South is because of cotton. Cotton gin's invented, the number of slaves in the South rises. The intended consequence is to make it easier to process cotton. The unintended consequence, it causes a greater need for slaves. And so, the cotton gin. What about this thing right here? What is that? It's my iPhone 11, right? I had one of every iPhone. That's not this. When the cell phone came out, I had a bag phone. It was a phone in a bag. Yeah. And you plugged it into the cigarette lighter. And, you know, unless you were in Atlanta, in Georgia, unless you were in Atlanta, you didn't have cell service. And then, you know, cell service improved, and Nokia came out with what was called the bar phone. It was about that long, about that wide, and about that big around. It was big and clunky. But you could do a little bit more than just call. What was the purpose of the cell phone? To make communication easier, right? So we can call each other without having to find a payphone or a landline or whatever. So, cell phones invented, communication becomes easier, and then Nokia and some other people come out with some really cool ideas, and you can start texting each other. Now, you had to get right up to it, and it was difficult, but you could text. And then they came out with what? The smartphone. And now what could they call and text, but they could use it as their GPS. They can use it as their computer. How many of y'all don't have a computer at home? This is your computer. Okay. That's pretty unusual, because I've had classes where this was it. This is what they had. And I can't imagine trying to type a paper. It'd be awful. So it's made things a lot easier. I was looking through my apps this morning, and, you know, I can schedule a haircut at Great Clips. I can read the Bible on here. I can keep up with people on social media. I can control the thermostat at my house from my cell phone. I have a camper, and on my cell phone, I can push an app, and I can find out how much propane gas I have in the tanks on my camper. Look at that. Right there. Okay? Tank 1, tank 2. So a lot of things opened up because of the cell phone. It has intended consequences, right? Communication, it makes our life a little bit easier. Are there unintended consequences? What? Hang on, what?
It just keeps everybody away from communication by mouth.
Okay, y'all don't know how to talk to each other. That's an unintended consequence. Yeah, do y'all take your phone to lunch? Okay. Do y'all talk to each other at lunch? No, y'all are going. So that's an unintended consequence. The ability to communicate face to face has diminished. Okay. Now, I'm not asking you this to get anybody in trouble. How many of your parents you're right down the road with mom and dad, the phone rings and they reach over and pick it up? Anybody's parents do that? They're breaking the law. Hands free. But actually picks up the phone and uses it. They breaking the law. Georgia is a hands-free state. Why is Georgia a hands-free state? Because there were too many instances where, hello, ah, boom, or I need to answer that text. Dang, there's that email from work. Let me just check that out real quick. Tick, driving with your elbow, and boom, you're dead. Okay, or worse. Oh, kid, bloop bloop. Ooh. And so that's an unintended distracted driving. Or my least favorite. Well, Dakota Durden gave me a look today, and I did not like that look. So I'm going to go on Facebook and I'm going to say, I'm not going to mention any names, but her name is Dee Durden. She gave me the ugliest look today, and blah, 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 blah. She is a blah, 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 and I don't like her, blah, 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 blah. And before I know it, everybody, all 17,000 Facebook friends have read about Dakota Durden, and I have destroyed her reputation. Why? Because it was easy. I could do it on Facebook, right? Anything like that ever happened to y'all? Somebody started a rumor about you on Facebook or Instagram, or somebody took a picture they shouldn't have taken and put it out there, So that's the inventor. The smartphone never intended for that to happen, but it does. So that's an unintended consequence. All right, I've spent enough time. The rule of law have made Dakota most uncomfortable. We live in a democracy, right? Do we live in a democracy? Actually, we live in a democratic republic. There's a slight difference. We elect people to represent us, or you might even hear it called a representative democracy. We don't represent ourselves in government. We elect people to represent us. In a true democracy, we would all get together and make decisions. Not very practical, is it? So, in democracy, the rule of law influences how people behave, how we procedures and policies, and it also limits the power of government. I told you Friday that this is what kind of classroom? It's a dictatorship. Okay? Which means what? I'm the supreme ruler. Right? What I say goes. I am not limited in my power over what happens in this classroom. But the U.S. government, our state government, Georgia's government, our city government, our county government are all limited in what they can do, how much power they have over their constituents, over the people that have chosen to be ruled, to be governed. Couple of examples of the rule of law: the stand your ground law. Anybody ever hear that? Basically, it means if you break in my house, I have the right to shoot you. Why? Because I feel threatened by you. Or if I'm walking down the street and you walk up to me with a baseball bat and you start sticking it in my face, I have the right to pull out my pistol and shoot you. Okay? That's the stand your ground law. I can defend myself. But what if I'm walking down the street with a baseball bat and the Braves just won and I'm so excited and I walk up to Damien and I go, "Hey, we won!" And he thinks that I'm about to beat him in the head with that bat. And he pulls out his gun and he shoots me. Was I really threatening him? No. I might have scared him just because I was acting crazy. Okay. Somebody breaks into my house, they're in for a rude awakening. Behind my door, my bedroom door, there is a 12 gauge assault shotgun. Has 8 shells in it. Those shells are double-aught buckshot. I'm not going to wait for him to open the door. I'm shooting through the door, through the wall. His only hope is that I hit, when I shoot through the wall, is that I hit the fireplace. Because that might stop it. Somebody breaks in my house, Freddie breaks in my house, and I go to shooting. Baldwin County's deputy sheriff's going to come out and go, do you know this person? Well, yeah, I do. I don't know what he's doing in my house, though. The door was locked. Not locked anymore. It's broken. Freddie broke in. And now there are pieces of Freddie all over my living room. They're not going to arrest me. I was standing my ground. Jim Crow laws. How many of you have heard of Jim Crow laws? Okay. Right after Reconstruction, so we're talking 1890s, states began to make laws that were intended to segregate society. In other words, black people and white people could not mix. They used terms like colored, okay, and white. And those people were never to mix. They couldn't mix. You couldn't go to school together. You couldn't go down to the Brick and have a pizza together. You couldn't go to Chick-fil-A and eat God's chicken sandwich together. Why? Because you might be different races. You couldn't use the same restroom. You couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. And those were called Jim Crow laws. They were intended to segregate society. They were intended to discriminate against African Americans. And they were the law. In some places they were written, in some places it was implied, but it was still the law. And we lived like that because of the rule of law. There's a good thing about the rule of law. Can it change? Yes. For example, it used to be against the law to spit on the sidewalk, or actually to spit in public. You know why? There's actually a good reason for it. Anybody like, we've just come through, well, we might be on the tail end of a pandemic. It's not disrespectful. It is gross, but it also spreads what? Germs. So they made it illegal to spit on the sidewalk. Spreading germs. Okay? I think most people have a better understanding of how germs are spread, and they don't go around doing that too often anymore. But the rule of law, and we're going to skip over that. Okay. Individuals, groups, and institutions all do things, don't we? We're all parts of groups that do things. Part of institutions that do things. Those actions have intended and unintended consequences. Intended and unintended consequences. A couple of examples. Our roles in our family, our roles in business, our role in schools. When we take on roles and we act according to those roles, it impacts our society. Dr. Greer, have y'all realized that he's crazy? I love him. I absolutely love him. He's crazy in a good way. He has acted today, right? What was his action that can have a direct impact on you? Lucky Locker Thursday, right? Is there an intended consequence? Yeah. Put your dang lock on your locker and lock it. That's the intended consequence. If you do that, you might win $10. If you don't do that, you might win what? 10 demerits. Okay? That's the intended consequence to really just remind you guys that you need to be responsible, lock your lockers. I mean, after all, you wouldn't put your $800 cell phone down on a bench and just walk away on purpose and leave it, right? You would protect it. You take care of your possessions. So that's the intended consequence. The unintended consequence is that one of y'all is going to put your lock on your locker, you're going to lock it, and you have not the first clue what your combination is, right? So you're not going to be able to get into your locker. Or you're going to be like, where's Marcus? Or you're going to be like Marcus, you put your lock on your locker, you went to unlock it, your lock unlocked, and then what happened, Marcus? It's broke. You're still locked out of your locker. It's not his fault. Okay? So there are always intended and unintended consequences that come about because of a person's actions or an institution's actions or a group's actions. Okay? Your religious beliefs, and I'm not going to ask if you go to church or not, if you're Jew, if you're Muslim, if you're Christian, but your religious beliefs impact how you act, or they should impact how you act, how you treat other people. How many of you have ever felt peer pressure? Okay, you know that's an individual or a group trying to get you to do something, and if you've never experienced it, you're going to. Okay, you're going to go to a party in high school, and people are going to be doing things they got no business doing, and you're going to be pressured to do it. And you got two choices: you can say, or yep. Okay, that's how a group or individual can impact you. So, one more. Location. Location, location, location. It's the first rule of real estate. Location, location, location. Why is that so important? Because location affects a society's economy, its culture, and its development. And let's look at Atlanta, Georgia for a minute. Atlanta started in the mid-1800s as a place where the railroad stopped. And that became increasingly important. So Atlanta began to grow, and it grew, and it grew until by 1861, with the start of the Civil War, it was arguably the most important city in the South. Why? Because of its location. That affected its economy. The economy went way up. The culture became different than the rest of the state of Georgia, and it developed a lot. Let's look at Sparta, Georgia. Okay? Are Sparta's and Atlanta's economy similar in any way? No. Is the culture of Atlanta and the culture of Sparta similar in any way? Well, there might be some similarities, but they're really two totally different cultures. And then development. Anybody been through Sparta lately? Is there any new construction going on in Sparta? Just maybe a house? Who knows? So location really impacts those three things. And we'll talk about latitude and longitude tomorrow. Don't forget, on Wednesday you'll have a little quiz. The Georgia Pledge. Okay? You have to write it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Let's see.